John, thanks very much. We're a bit more than halfway through the program, and so given it's quite a short program today, please feel free to go and get a coffee or a sandwich if you'd like one. But what I'd like to do is to kick off the moderated discussion now. Now, in addition to our four speakers, there's a lot of expertise of various sorts in the room. And what I'll do maybe just straight away is just open the floor for questions, and please direct them to me. But if you have a particular speaker in mind who you'd like to address your question, then please do let me know who that could be. Show of hands. Bill Barron. And could you please also identify yourself and where you're from?
Bill Barron from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Can I just ask, Jay, among the list of technologies that you see as playing a significant role in the future, where would you put battery electric vehicles?
Well, the battery electric vehicle comes in basically three forms. The sort of current hybrid design in, say, a Prius. Then you can go to the plug-in electric, which will come to the market fairly soon with the Nissan Leaf and then the Chevy Volt. And then you have the all-electric car, which is with no gasoline engine, which is available in niche markets right now with, say, the Tesla car. This is being very heavily subsidized in the United States right now. The list price on the Leaf is going to be $32,000. The federal tax incentive is $7,000. The California tax incentive is $5,000. So if you buy one in California, you're getting a tax break of $12,000. I generally, in my book on U.S. energy policy, I have what I call threefers and twofers. If something is good economically, it's good for national security, and it's good for the environment, it's a threefer. The electric plug-in I call a two and a halfer because there have been several laboratory studies that argue that they're better for climate change. But I have read those studies and have some doubts about the assumptions that were used in building those studies. So I'm not sure, but it is sort of there ready to go. As opposed to hydrogen, you can see the path to market because you have the hybrid now. I drive a Prius. It's a very, very nice car. And it's still what you would call an early technology. I mean, they can tweak. Anytime something's that new, the engineers are improving it all the time. So it's easy to move that to plug-in. Now, with plug-in, it's important that most of the plugging in be at night because that's when capacity utilization is lower. So, from an engineer standpoint, if you're going to have plug-in electrics, you probably want time-of-day pricing. Most economists love time-of-day pricing. I'm not sure customers like it that well. But with a smart grid, this starts to get more feasible. In fact, you could have, with a smart grid, you could just have that car being recharged when the windmills are blowing, which is being wasted energy at night. So I think there's a lot to be said for it. It's good pricing, good use of resources. I don't favor subsidizing anything at that level. It just seems to me it's not fair to like diesels, which offer some of the same advantages. But there's a lot riding on battery technology right now, and the lithium battery is the next stage. And I think that's a place where China, the U.S., and others can compete and can cooperate to see how far they can advance those batteries. I kind of think it's like computers. If there's a market for lighter, longer lasting, better battery, that will probably come to market. So generally I am in favor of it. I think it needs to be monitored closely, again, so that we're not recharging them at peak load periods. But I think it's a positive on the horizon and doable because you can do it by increments.
Hi, James Ockenden with Blue Skies China. Actually, I have a question for Mr. Hakes, but first, just an observation while Dr. Burnett was talking there. We're sitting here on a very bright summer's day, and there's about 120 spotlights shining on us. I don't know if that's in honor of our guest from CLP, but Oh, it's the wrong side of the island, sorry. My question is very interesting, Mr. Hakes. Thanks so much for your political insight there. And it was interesting you bring up the space race. And I've just been reading some new research about the launch of Sputnik in the International Geophysical Year and how the Eisenhower administration responded to that, and how in many ways in the US the Soviet threat was actually over-exaggerated and perhaps wasn't so much of a threat, but was very much special interest groups trying to get the NASA underway and get R&D funding for the US-owned space race. Now, I wonder if we can draw any, I wonder if we can draw any parallels there with climate change. There's a very strong sort of alarmism wave in the US. I don't know how strongly that's actually taken into account by the people you're talking about, by the Senate and the Congress and the executive branch. But is alarmism perhaps causing problems for climate change legislation? Because a lot of Republicans I know are very much climate change skeptics, perhaps not because they don't believe the science, but in sort of backlash to alarmism, to sort of Al Gore's type of movie. So I'm just wondering from your US political perspective, if you have any thoughts on that and sort of the Soviet threat, as it were, of climate change.
After the United States passed the Clean Air Act in 1970, there were three sort of environmental issues on the agenda. These were the ozone layer issue, the sulfur issue, and what they called at the time the carbon pollution issue. We dealt with the ozone layer issue in 1986 or 87, I forget which. The U.S. passed amendments to the Clean Air Act in 1990 that dealt with the sulfur issue. And starting with the Rio Treaty in 1992, we started on a path to deal with climate change. It is true that Al Gore, Roger Revelle, who was the principal scientist developing climate change going back to the 1950s, he actually incidentally got his money to study the collection of carbon in the greenhouse gas layer because of Sputnik. There was so much money floating around in the science community that in the late 50s you could actually get money to study this, which they've been wanting to do for a long time. And Al Gore took a course from Roger Revelle, so even back in the 80s he was talking about this. And I think this is an issue that's exactly the opposite from alarmism. If you have a case where, say, the chemicals go in the river near your house and it catches on fire, something will be done about it immediately. Whereas with climate change right now, for most people, there's no visible impact from it. So you can say that someone did a calculation recently, and I haven't double-checked the numbers, so I don't know if it's true or not, but they said that if the Copenhagen agreements that were made there by individual countries were kept, that we would have a 3 degrees Celsius change by 2100. Now, in the United States, we're Fahrenheit, but it's always listed in the Celsius number. So most Americans are underestimating this problem. I mean, I guarantee you. I mean, you know, we're saying now that our target is 2 degrees Celsius. That's 3.6 Fahrenheit. So Americans are saying the change is going to be 2% Fahrenheit. So this is a little bit like the frog, that if the water heats up real quick, the frog's going to jump out of the water. If it just gets a little bit hotter at a time, the frog's going to stay in the water and the frog's going to die. There are a lot of things in climate change that are time lagged because of ocean depositions of carbon. If you go back to the original National Academy of Sciences study in 1979, they said the first effects are going to be seen in the Arctic, and they explained why, and that's what's happened. They also said that the early evidences and temperatures were going to be muted by sulfates, and they were going to be offset by ocean activities. So I don't know, you know, if you're putting up something today into the air that's basically garbage, and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to have to deal with it, that to me is a serious issue that ought to be dealt with. And when I see people you know, if you put something up on the blog on climate change, you will get 10 science denier responses within 2 minutes in any American major blog, even the New York Times, which would be, you know, sort of a pro-climate change activity. They never address what the science is. It's only Al Gore's for it, so it must be wrong. And I have found on planes with mechanical engineers who are usually like, you know, that I can flip them on it because the science is relatively clear. We know, one, that we can measure the human addition to the greenhouse gas layer. We know it's now 35% or a little bit less. We have temperature measuring space locations all over the globe. We have models that have been tested back and forth that have had some well-publicized blips along the way, but generally have been fairly reactive. So this, we're sort of knowing. And so, you know, you can say the temperature of the world is going to change 3 degrees Celsius. Is that alarming or not? I don't know. I would say the security issue that was mentioned earlier, that there are some places in, like, say, the deserts of Africa where it is an emergency right now. I mean, you take the Darfur War, that was the loss of arable land. And one of the clear things from climate change is dehydration of soils. And so you're actually creating failed states in places where, at least in the U.S., we feel some responsibility to intervene. And these interventions are very expensive. And so if you take into account those kinds of...
His recent book, called The Great Disconnect, with the need to move from a look at material value to perhaps a deeper set of values in addressing global issues. And I wonder, Bill, if you'd like to add something.
Well, the context really was, I arrived at values with considerable reluctance after having looked at what markets are capable of doing and not capable of doing, what governments are capable of doing through, say, imposing a price on carbon and some other administrative kinds of things, and you look at all of that, and it isn't compelling, isn't convincing that that will be anywhere near enough to get us into a world in which we are using less than 1/5 of the amount of energy, fossil-based energy, that we are today. Not to mention issues of other resource kinds of things. And one of the things that struck me when it comes to values is that we tend to assume that values just sort of are, or if not fixed, are at least prevail for a very long time. And yet, when I thought back on it, I realized how much values had changed in the 60-plus years of my life in terms of the values I remember as a child and other people talk about from the 1950s. It was a different set of values. And I think that in a more potentially severely resource-constrained world, if we don't change our values, even if we survive, we'll be miserable. So the question is how to be happy with less. And that inevitably is spirituality or religion, and I think that however you want to define it, it's almost inescapable, because when you look at the kinds of changes that will be required to pull back from the brink of climate change and other real fundamental resource issues, we better begin to think about how we can get by with a lot less and be happy with a lot less. And I kind of ended the book just with the idea of, I don't know how we do that. I certainly wouldn't want to have anyone preach to me about how I should do that. But on the other hand, you know, we can't avoid it, I think. And we tend to pull back because talk about big government. This is even worse in some ways, because it kind of, you know, we're telling people how they should feel, not only what they should be able to do. So, you know, in this age of liberalism, we kind of pull back. But I think we're going to have to rediscover it, because we don't have any choice.
Thank you. Maybe we could just move from values to personal responsibility. And just interested in a comment that John made about the fact that the tenants of buildings are responsible for more than